What's up, y'all? My name is Cordell, aka Hot Cocoa, and today we're going to talk about how to balance multiple creative projects so that you're not drowning in them, you're flourishing in them. So if that sounds cool, stick around. Before we move on, I want to give a big shout out to Rick Trashbag. He's officially my first Patreon subscriber, where I've got a bunch of Ableton project breakdowns and drum racks and other really cool creative resources for you. So if you want to join Rick Trashbag, support me in this channel, you can find the link down below. Okay, so this is a massive topic and I don't want to waste any time, so let's just dive straight into it. A polymath is someone who is really good at a bunch of different things. This is not a black-white situation. It's not like you're a polymath or you're not, but you're more polymathic if you have more things that you're interested in, more diverse projects that you're trying to balance all at the same time. Now, the Polymath's Dilemma is how to do that. How do you get pretty good at a lot of different things and balance all of them so that you're not dropping the ball with others, you're getting lost in how many different projects that you're working on? That's exactly what we're diving into today. I'm going to give you 3 mindset things that can make it difficult for you to mentally process having multiple creative projects so that you're doing as many things as you want to without feeling like it's an issue for you. So by far, the biggest issue that people bring to me as a creativity coach that keeps people from doing lots of different projects is time. If you really want to balance multiple different things, you need to change your beliefs around time. In the coaching world, there's this thing called a limiting belief, and this is just any type of belief you have that is keeping you from achieving things that you want to do. And time is by far one of the biggest limiting beliefs people have when they're trying to balance multiple creative projects. They'll say, I don't have the time to do what I want to do. As soon as I hear this from like a coaching perspective, I know there's a lot more to dive into because this is a very surface level issue. Let me explain why. It's just putting a belief into the world that justifies why you're not spending time on things. There's a bunch of other ways that you could frame these kind of ideas that will make it more accurate, and it'll also make you have the agency and the ability to move forward with these things if you want to, rather than being like, I just can't, there's no way for me to do it. So instead of saying, I don't have the time to read, say, I'm not prioritizing reading right now, or I'm prioritizing other things instead of reading right now. There are certain things that you really don't have time for, like, I can't read all the books in the world, I don't have enough time. Sometimes it's true, but just in general, if you're like, I don't have time to read, for example, it's just not true. And the reason it's not true is because usually that I don't have time comes with an expectation of how much time there is to do something. We're just using reading as an example, but it could be anything. Let's say 60 seconds a day. You're technically reading. The belief I don't have time to read washes that possibility away. You might frame it like, I don't have the time to read as much as I would like. But if something is really that important to you that you want to put it into your life, you can find the time. And the way you do that is by dedicating specific times to putting your energy and attention into this particular practice or activity. And I've actually got a pretty fun way to think about this balance of how many activities you're doing and how much time these things kind of take. Check this out. If you think of a graph as an x-axis with all of the things that you're doing, and the y-axis is how long these things take or how much time you want to dedicate to it, you can start to get a different shape for different lifestyles, let's say. So if you have very few things that you're working on, you'd have a very short x-axis. And if you have not a lot of time that you're spending on those things, you'd have a very small y-axis. This is a life in which you're just not doing a lot of things, right? You're spending a little bit of time on a very few amount of projects. The size of this square is proportional to the size of your polymathy, or the amount of diversity that you've got going on in your lifestyle. What you probably want to avoid are these 2 different kinds of rectangles. So if you have very few things that you're working on and you're dedicating tons of time to it, this could be fine for some people. I'm not saying this is necessarily bad, but if you feel like you want to have diverse creative projects that are touching on lots of different things, then this is going to feel really stifling to you. It's like, I'm only playing piano all the time. there's nothing else going on. If you're dealing with this really tall rectangle, if you want to get more balanced with your polymathic approach, you can actually just start to do more things. Extend that x-axis and dedicate more time to different types of projects, and you'll be able to get more of a square than this rectangle. The other kind of rectangle is what a lot of kind of really creative polymathic people struggle with, is a really long x-axis, so you're doing tons of different things, but you feel like you're not dedicating enough time to them, or you don't feel like you have enough time to actually balance all of these things. So this would be a really long rectangle here. If this is where you're at, you've got a really long x-axis, you've got a lot of things you want to do, but the time feels like it's not enough, you can change your perception of time and your understanding and your expectations around time to be much broader than they are. This will raise your y-axis and give you more of a square on this particular graph so that you feel like you've got the time to actually tackle all of these different projects. Okay, one of the benefits of plotting out all of the different types of projects you're doing in that graph is that it lets you write them all out. It's really helpful to see visually all of the things that you're working on. One of the things this will help you do is to prioritize each of them so you can see which one is most important, but even beyond that, you can balance your priorities. What I mean by balance your priorities is look at the relationships between the different things that you really want to do, and you'll start to find that a lot of times you can have a symbiotic relationship with a lot of these projects. Figuring out how one can actually reinforce the other can be really helpful in feeling like you can actually do a lot of different things without stretching yourself too thin. When you have multiple things in your life that build and support on the other things in your life, they build on each other. This is how you enter what I call an upward spiral, and what developmental psychologists call a developmental cascade. This is when all of the things that are helping you change over time are coalescing and building on each other. Let's say you really want to spend some time with friends, but you have a bunch of creative projects that you're working on. Instead of feeling like you have to dedicate time to each one and balance them out and get them in your calendar, you can merge them together, so that doing kind of collaborative creative projects will help you express yourself and try out these skills and get that socialization and connect with other people. That way the creativity is building the relationships, and the relationships are building the creativity. Let's say you want to work on a project, but you also want to do some type of exercise. You want to go to the gym, you want to cycle, you want to do something like that. You can figure out a way to merge a creative project with something that's more physically demanding. So for example, I've been getting really into different types of dance lately because I'm working on tons of music things and I want to continue to express myself musically, but I gotta stay fit. So I can merge a lot of these different things so that I'm doing different types of choreography and physical movement and bodied expression while still keeping it connected to a lot of my other projects. Might even turn into some music videos, who knows? The classic example of this is having a day job and wanting to create and make music or write or something along those lines. Merging those is way easier said than done, but is a really valid strategy. Figure out how to monetize your creative work so that your creativity is actually bringing in more finances that allow you to create with more depth. When they resonate well, this is a really beautiful relationship. In the ideal scenario, those two things could actually merge together. So it's not like I've got to go do this thing and then I've got to create, but rather you're creating in a way that meets those needs. Every individual project that you have consists of tons of smaller little tasks and projects. For example, if you want to make a painting, you have to get the paints. You've got to sometimes mix the colors that you want. You've got to pick the easel. You've got to pick the spot in which you're going to paint. You have to pick the subject. Each of these things could be their own project on a smaller level. If you think a level up, all of these other projects like making a painting, making album art, writing a song, designing a dance, writing a book, whatever projects you're working on, could be considered smaller parts of a bigger project. Figuring out your bigger overarching umbrella projects can be really helpful for your mental load. I mentioned earlier writing things down is really helpful. That's because our brains can only hold about 5 to 7 things in them at once in our working memory. If you're trying to think about more than 5 to 7 things, it might as well be a million things. It just gets really overwhelming really fast. But if you can make your list of things you're thinking about smaller, the mental load also gets smaller and it just feels less stressful to work on. So if you have 5 to 7 or more creative projects, it would be really helpful for you to make it feel like you only have 1 to 2 projects. We call this super categorization, and that just means you're creating a category above the category that you have. This has been one of the most helpful strategies for me personally because a lot of the different projects I'm working on fit within bigger umbrellas. So for example, I want to play with some new synthy hardware stuff. That could be one project. But I also want to do some new sound design so I can make some sample packs and give myself a palette of sounds. But I also want to produce some music. But I also want to perform stuff live. Super Categorization can help me take all of these projects and put them into one bucket of, say, electronic percussion. I'm just working on being an electronic percussionist in my mind. And that helps me stay clear on my direction, on my vision, on the purpose that I've set for myself. And it helps all these smaller projects feel consumed by this bigger one. So it feels like I just have one really big project. The bigger these categories get, the more close you're getting to developing a sense of life purpose, which is functionally the biggest category of project that you're working on. That includes pretty much everything that you're doing. A really beautiful metaphor for this is known as the frayed rope metaphor. And this is when you think of all of your smaller projects that you're working on as bundled together and woven in such a way that it makes a rope. Now, we call it the frayed rope metaphor because in terms of creative lifestyles, a frayed rope means you have a bunch of things you're working on that are intricately interwoven, but you still have smaller things kind of bouncing off of that. What that means is you can still do things that aren't directly tied to your life purpose or your super goals and this like big meta narrative that you have for yourself. If you want to just sew one day because you feel like it, you're doing some baking and it has nothing to do with your bigger projects, that's totally fine. You're allowed to be multifaceted. You're allowed to do many different things that don't directly interconnect. This is also a big mindset thing, that you can only do things that are part of your brand and part of your career and like in a particular direction. Obviously those things are helpful, which is why the rope is still a rope and not just a pile of twine and string. But having those little frays out there can actually be really robust for enjoying your life and getting new interesting experiences that might eventually in interesting ways contribute to your rope or your life purpose. All right, those are all the tips that I got for you on balancing multiple creative projects. If you found that helpful, please hit the like button and the subscribe button for me. If you have tips that have helped you balance multiple creative projects, place it down in the comments section so we can have a discussion about what works and what doesn't. Everyone is so unique that I want to know what you've tried, what hasn't worked, what has worked. Let's break it down in the comments. If you want to explore creativity and psychology in even more depth, you can go to upwardacts.com, which you can find down below in the description, where I've got podcasts on this. I've got a ton more articles. I've got different types of concept maps that you can explore and all kinds of other resources that'll help you create to the best of your ability. Let me know if there are any other creativity psychology topics you want me to dive into. And until next time, peace.